3, 4. Good day and welcome to the Phil Barrett Show. Here coming to you from an undisclosed location. Great to be back with you. I know it's been a few weeks. Another busy time of year, although there isn't a time of year that it isn't busy. We're preparing in Clifton Park for our summer camps, our pools, our July 4th celebration, hiring a couple hundred people to make sure you have a safe and enjoyable experience at all of those events and destination points and many other items of importance going on in our local municipalities. Just want to start off as we usually do with some updates on some things that are happening around the area. We had Dr. Dan Cools on recently here in the podcast. He is the commissioner of the Department of Health, Saratoga County, and we talked about the build out of the Environmental Health Department, and that has been a multi-year task, working directly with the New York State Department of Health to fully build out a county environmental health unit and accept all of the responsibilities of environmental health that were previously undertaken by New York State, and that process is now complete as of yesterday. So yesterday we call Independence Day in Saratoga County as far as our environmental health is concerned. We've hired 20 professionals, and as we discussed with Dr. Cools, and if you missed that podcast, go back. There's some great information in there and some things that might be important to you as a business or an individual. The largest of the tasks was restaurant inspections. You know, there's a tremendous amount of restaurants and food establishments in Saratoga County, so you can imagine the effort that it takes to ensure that all of those inspections are done in a timely basis. We just recently, Jay, passed the five-year mark since the world shut down for COVID.
Oh,
You probably remember that.
oh yeah.
Maybe not fond.
Some things were fun actually. I like the fact there was no traffic. That was great. But no, that was terrible. I mean, all of our lives were put on hold, and friends and families weren't seen. It was terrible.
Yeah.
I didn't like that at all.
No, it was a terrible time in our history. Hopefully, something that we'll never have to live through again. And but it did engender a great many memories for me. None of them very fond, but I do remember from the very beginning when the world shut down and everything went into hibernation. It was so different for everybody. Everything that we went through, if just as an individual or if you're trying to manage a business or a governmental operation, things were changing every single day, new mandates coming down constantly. And I remember going back to that March, and as we got a little further into it, the availability of masks was something that was first and foremost on folks' minds. And I always hand it to my wife. She always jumps in with any of these community issues that occur. She actually was able to raise $60,000 to purchase masks. And
Awesome.
she and I donated a few $1,000s, and we were able to get some N95 masks. We donated those to EMS units in Saratoga County, as well as policing departments, including the sheriff's department, because at that time, even N95 masks were very rare and something that was considered important for everybody, but certainly our first responders. So we did that very early on. It was a very interesting way how I was able to procure those masks. I won't get into it now, but they were very difficult to come by. Then we were able to find an outlet to buy masks in very large bulk, and teamed with some other municipalities in the area. We were able to buy masks that we could distribute publicly. People were clamoring for them. We immediately had public distribution of masks, and I'll never forget, if you're familiar with the Clifton Common, where the senior center is, I think we were starting at, it was either 8 or 9 o'clock, and 45 minutes prior to starting the public distribution, where people would just drive up and we'd hand them the masks that were again in very short supply. The line of traffic was down Fisher Ferry Road before we got started. So that we tend to forget those things, but and then we use that same public distribution structure for many other, we did multiple mass distributions because I was able to find a supplier with a great many masks. When they were very rare, then it got into test kits and anything that we could get our hands on and be able to publicly distribute. And we had many of those throughout the worst of the pandemic. But that very early response in a lot of these areas was important to a lot of folks. Um, People would call my office in tears because they couldn't get a vaccine, for instance. I hope we've learned a lot since COVID about different ways of protecting yourself and maintaining health as much as you can, and the things that we used to protect ourselves from the pandemic. I think we've learned a lot about the versatility and usefulness of masks as well as vaccines. But I said back then, and I'll say now, that's a personal choice.
Yeah.
And it should have always been and should always be a personal choice whether somebody wants to get a vaccine or wear a mask when they're sick or during a pandemic or flu season, whatever the case may be. Those should all be personal decisions that somebody makes.
Yeah, I have to say, just a little look back, introspective look on what our life was like during that time. The one thing I have to say, as much as I'm not an Andrew Cuomo guy or a Chris Cuomo guy for that matter, but the one thing I actually looked forward to the most was the daily briefings that him and the two of them had.
Mm-hmm.
They were they were kind of funny, lighthearted, and sometimes it did bring a little bit of brevity and lightheartedness to a rather dark and serious situation. So kudos to, I know he got a lot of flack for it. I know that not a lot of people really gave him a hard time because they thought it was making fun of the situation. But for me personally, I look forward to the daily briefing between him and his brother because it added a little bit of lightheartedness to a pretty dark time in our life.
Yeah, and it was very important. I felt from the beginning that town hall never closed, and it didn't. I said to everybody at town hall in our team as the shutdown occurred that we are in the people business. This is what we chose to do, and we will be here every day because if the town closes, where are people going to go? I mean, there was still life was still happening. People still needed things that they would need during any course of a day or year. In addition to all the other services that we offered, we had a great group of volunteers that delivered donated dinners to people for weeks at a time. Big thank you to Ravenswood, Rusty Nail. They donated a tremendous amount of money. The food drives we did for food banks, those two restaurants were right there to help. And
Two good ones right there.
yeah, we had so much support because we understood the importance that seniors in particular, getting them dinners, during that time. Food for the food bank when people were hurting, and whether it's Captain, Faith Food Pantry, the Shen Helping Hands Food Pantry in Jonesville, who we support on an ongoing basis. It was very important they have what they need to serve the people in need, and that was an important part of what we were doing as well. So it was an interesting time after you reach certain years after something happens. It's a time to reflect, and during that 5-year anniversary of the world shutting down, did take some time to reflect on what happened and start to remember everything that we tried to do for folks in Clifton Park and Saratoga County. So very difficult time. Thankfully, it's over. let's hope we never have to deal with that again.
Agreed.
And are you happy with the Doge effort so far?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny. I had a couple of conversations with some mutual friends about this. Um, as much as I think it's great, all the savings we're doing and all the deep dives into all these programs and finding out there is so much fraud, waste, and abuse. I do, however, have reservations on the way it's being handled. The Elon Musk with a chainsaw on the stage and stuff like that. I think at the end of the day, whether it's a useful program or not, it's still people's jobs. So to be so unapologetically happy about cutting jobs, I think it's kind of tough. Having been being an employer and having to fire people or get rid of people, I never thought, even if it was firing somebody that did me wrong, I never enjoyed that. So other than that, take that aside, I think it's great that we dive in. I think they're at what, almost $790 per American that they've saved already. The tune of almost $700 billion.
The part that's really concerning. Well, it's a lot of things that are concerning, but one new revelation is the fraud, and I think we always knew it was there, but the amount of fraud in our social service programs like Social Security.
The amount of people getting checks that are no longer around.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And those checks are getting cashed. That's the crazy part of it.
Yeah.
They're getting cashed.
And how they described how easy it was to call Social Security and have them change the address or wherever the check is going, and how that is done with very little oversight, apparently, from the people taking the call. And boy, if we can't get on board with that and some of the other things that are going on, I'm not sure we'll ever come together as a country.
Yeah, the USAID is a perfect example of a government organization that is being funded by the taxpayer that's actively working against the interest of our own country.
And
nuts.
And whether they're calling it one big beautiful bill, whatever they're calling it, legislation that will lead to an extension of tax cuts that were approved in 2017, which are extremely important to every individual, every business, and our economy at large. And of course, it's always addressed by one side of the aisle as, well, how are you going to pay for those tax cuts? How are you going to cover the lost revenue? But things don't work statically.
Correct.
And supply side economics always works. If you look through history, when it's tried, which isn't very often, it always works. And since 2017, there's been a 46% increase in tax revenue. 46%. We saw the same thing during the 1980s.
And with dramatic cuts in taxes at the same time.
Well, that's my point. Since the tax cuts were enacted, we have a 46% increase in tax revenue, but we've had a 70% increase in spending.
Well, that's the biggest problem there.
So how can you ever, eventually you run out of other people's money, how could you ever tax people enough to cover 70% increases in spending?
You can't.
It's impossible. It's impossible. So as we've seen, each and every time there's tax cuts, there's economic growth, there's more money in the system, there's more of an incentive for people to be risk takers, and that's what makes our economy go, and a huge increase in tax revenues. But when you spend 70% more, well, obviously you're still at a deficit. So it's just very, very frustrating to constantly hear how tax cuts need to be paid for when it's not the government's money to begin with, but tax cuts have always led to increasing revenues.
I've always said America has never had an income problem.
No.
We've always had a spending problem.
Yeah.
All the
If
time.
we just went back to spending levels pre-COVID, I mean, we'd basically have a balanced budget with a few cuts around the edges.
Pave the undisclosed road across the undisclosed location with gold.
Yeah, absolutely. The studio would be made of gold.
Made of gold.
Well,
not taxpayer funded gold.
Yeah, that's right. Privately
Yes.
funded.
Yes.
And that's what we want. We do have a great guest with us today. Very honored to have the one and only Dan Martin, the voice of your racing life. Welcome, Dan.
Welcome, sir.
Nice to be here. Good to see you, Phil. Good to see you, Jay.
Let's do a good introduction. Let's hear you do an Albany Saratoga Speedway introduction. Put you on the spot right here.
We're still a few weeks away from me saying, welcome to the Speedway. Welcome here to the Albany Saratoga Speedway, what we call the Great Race Place.
Nice. I like
You
it.
nailed it.
Hey, there it is.
Nailed it.
Right on the spot, and he got it right down.
We'll tune it up a little more before that.
Usually when you have the smell of the gasoline roar of the engine, gets you a little piped up a little more, and
A little bit of adrenaline.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
That makes it a little more special.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I was able to interview Dan for my my blog, philbarrett.org, a little less than a year ago, and learned a little bit more about Dan, things I didn't know, and delved into his childhood a little bit and his long relationship with the sport of auto racing here in the capital region. And Dan, tell us a little bit about how you first became interested in auto racing. I know your dad was a part of that, certainly.
Indeed.
Yeah.
A lot of it is hereditary, and I grew up around it.
The family business.
It was, now I'll date myself, but growing up in southern Saratoga County, I grew up around a lot of racers. I was friends with family friends. My father grew up, legendary name, Irv Taylor. They were best of buddies. They were school chums. I guess we can use the air quotes, they raced hell together.
Yeah.
There you go.
Irv just found a way to get paid for it. And,
Well, racers are known for that.
and had a great career. But I talk a lot about that, and it still shows today. Some of the legendary families in racing here in our area geographically. I grew up with the Ronca family. I grew up with the Proctor family. They're both very still involved. You know, they're 3 generations deep into racing now. And on my ride home on the school bus, I would go by Pete Corey's house. I'd go by Irv
Yeah.
Taylor's house. I'd go by George Proctor's house.
Yeah.
Go by the Roncas, and numerous other, cars that were involved in the other divisions, back then, Chargers and late models. But it was around me. My father, like I said, with his involvement and friendship with Irv Taylor, he went to Fonda every Saturday night. This was before Albany Saratoga opened. I was a wee lad. Let's see, I'd be 7 years old when Albany Saratoga opened. And of course, that was an asphalt track at the time. My
Right.
father wasn't a real big fan of asphalt.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go. There was a lot of crossover between some of the competitors, but he would put his thought. We didn't have a heck of a lot of money to go 2 nights to, so in order for me to go to Fonda on a Saturday night, I'd be picking weeds in the garden or something to that effect, and then 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was hit the shower and we're heading west. The Friday night scene, however, was a little bit different because I and all my school chums would end up the road at Albany Saratoga. That sometimes meant one of our mothers would have to go and drop us off, and there used to be a payphone out by the ticket turnstile.
Yeah.
And we'd have to call Mom when it was done. And back then, to get into the Albany Saratoga Speedway when everybody else was trying to get out, we found ourselves having to walk out to Route 9 and
Dodging all the cars.
and God rest our mothers that put up with that, and they'd come and they'd pick us up, and of course we're talking racing on the way home. I can remember, as a matter of fact, on my way to the undisclosed location here, I drove by where I knew
Nice.
that there used to be a racer that was just down the road, and we would have to take a slight detour on the way home to see if they were unloading the race car. It was an infection. It's an infection that there's no known cure for, and that's just how I was involved with it. I was around it. probably closer than a lot of other people would be in, John Q. Public. So I probably got my roots dug in a little bit deeper at a young age.
Now, when you drove by those race shops as a kid, didn't you just wonder, God, what they're doing it there?
Oh,
Right?
The thoughts.
What's going on in there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I named off some names. With Pete Corey at the time was the top of the top,
Yeah.
and we'd go by and just being able to look through. He had a great big picture window in his house, and you could see the trophies. You could see the bling, and trophies weren't then what they are today, but they were
Yeah.
still pretty impressive to an 8-10-year-old kid.
I
Sure.
remember where my mom is from. Lenny Bowler had his garage. You remember Lenny Bowler?
I remember from coming to Malta every Friday night with
Yeah,
Old Blue.
that's
At
right.
that time, Fred DeSaro was pretty much my favorite driver, and Freddie was driving. That was after he and Bugsy Stevens had swapped rides, but Freddie was driving Old Blue, and I followed Lenny Bowler right up to the final years that he and, of course, the Bowler family could still continue on with Old Blue.
Yeah, they sure do. And so if we were anywhere near that area, Bug Stevens Auto Salvage was down there, and Lenny Bowler's shop, which seeing pictures years later, it was quite a mess. But anyway, as anybody that knows Lenny Bowler, a legendary car owner, and if we were anywhere near that area, I would say to my grandmother or my mother or my father, can we just go by? Can we just go by? Well, Philip, you're not gonna be able to see anything. Well, I just want to go by.
So
Yeah, because because you're just so as a kid, you're just wondering what's going on in there, and just the opportunity that you might see the car outside was pretty cool. So that's a memory that just came back to me when you mentioned that. I remember, if because we had a few tracks around us, and on Saturday afternoon, similar to your story, we're out playing outside or doing whatever, and then at some point I'd hear my father say, "All right, Philip, get dressed, let's go," and we'd be going to Seekonk Speedway.
to the Cement Palace.
Yes,
Yeah.
Saturday night with the Vendetti family, all those years, and when we lived somewhere else, waiting in the afternoon for the cars to go by. I'd sit out in the front yard and wait because I might see a couple cars go by. That was pretty cool. So it's that brought back a couple of memories when you were saying that, and yeah, you're right. At that time, Malta was asphalt. Of course, it many years later went back to asphalt, which didn't work out so well. But your dad was a huge dirt racing fan. Now, when you were running with the Roncas and the Proctors and heading up to Albany, Saratoga on a Friday night, when did the sickness really set in? Because I've always labeled auto racing as a sickness. It's something that you catch usually at a younger age, and it just never shakes you.
I was a big fan. Obviously, as we just mentioned, I was a big fan. Went as much as I could. Did I have the thoughts of would I be able to do this someday? Of course, we all wish,
Yeah.
but wasn't sure that would ever happen. But I just knew I loved racing, and I was going to be around it in some way, shape, or form. I actually, I didn't have the resources or anything to. And at that time, there were no kids getting into racing.
Right, right.
You were,
Not like today. Today is a lot of kids.
no, there was you did it on pretty much, it was all your dime, so you had to be a full-time working person with all the resources to go along with it. So I started out actually as a teenager racing motorcycles, flat track motorcycles. And there I go back to relationship with the Proctors, many of the Proctor family, a number of the brothers, 4 brothers, 5 kids in all. Don't want to shortcut Mary because she's just as integral as all of them. But a couple of the brothers, the elder brothers, George Jr. and Ronnie, both went car racing, And the two younger brothers, Tommy and Jeff, went motorcycle racing. And we did some flat track motorcycle racing, and then got into the high school years where maybe your time and money got sidetracked a little bit, whether we were chasing race cars, motorcycles, or chasing girls. It didn't matter.
Right.
But it was a little bit later in life. I was pushing 30 before I was probably would have been, well, I'm doing some quick math here. I would have been in my late 20s before I started racing, and that just became. I bought a mini sprint. I never hit the track with it. The mini sprints were just coming on then. I bought a mini sprint.
Those are fun.
And it was really in the infancy of mini sprint racing around here.
For those of us who don't know what mini sprints are, what are they? Can you describe them a little bit?
They're they're not half scale. They're bigger than half, but they're a smaller scale version of a sprint car, and they were powered by motorcycle engines. Still are. We're going to see them at Albany, Saratoga a couple times this year.
Are those the same ones that run in the arenas?
Yes.
Okay.
Similar.
Similar.
Much like that.
They got their open wheel. They have the wings.
Yeah. They run those inside the arenas.
They're fun.
They actually didn't they have them a couple of years ago at the MVP arena?
I believe they may.
Yeah.
Did they? Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah.
As
They're fun.
As a companion to some event there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're fun.
But the mini sprints were yet to catch on here. I had a offer to trade my mini sprint, because the mini sprints were getting more popular, for a race ready mini modified, which was at the time a smaller scale modified.
Yep.
And this was before they started dealing with the 6 cylinders and the 8 cylinders. They were all 4-cylinder engines.
Right.
I picked up a car in this trade. This guy wanted my mini sprint in the worst way. I got and it was one of the top-notch cars. It was a mid-engine BMW powered center steer version of a modified, and I got the trailer and everything else that went
Wow.
with it.
Oh wow.
I think you got the better end of that deal.
You couldn't say no.
Yeah.
This was a no-brainer. So I ran with the minis. The minis didn't have a home. They traveled. I raced at Albany, Saratoga, Devil's Bowl, Lebanon Valley, and Airborne Speedway up in Plattsburgh.
Wow.
But I only did it a year. Just a bunch of friends that got together, and we were going to do this, and had some good help, and didn't have a lot of success. But I guess I caught the bug. Is where you're going.
Yeah. Well, you must have learned a lot, because then you graduated into pro stocks and won the championship at Albany, Saratoga.
That my year with the mini modifieds left me to, I need a place I can go every weekend.
Yeah.
The natural was 5 miles up the road from my house was Albany, Saratoga on a Friday night.
Right.
Had a great friend from high school, Scott Knoll, had top-notch equipment. Father owned an auto parts store and a machine shop. Scott was a motor builder. Scott had a lot of success in that division, and Scott was moving up to the modifieds. So natural reaction. Scott's car became for sale, and guess who the buyer was going to be?
Beautiful.
That was 1985, and 85 I was the rookie of the year in pro stocks. I finished second in the points in 85 and came back in, or excuse me, 85 I was in the mini. 86 I was the rookie of the year at Malta in the pro stocks, finished second in the points, came back the next year and won the championship in 87.
Which is quite a feat. To win any championship.
Yeah, really, that's
Albany,
amazing.
Saratoga is quite an accomplishment.
It's something that, I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah.
I had a great time. I didn't get to race. I didn't race all that many years. The pro stock division was really evolving more into what it is today. Back then, it was just more of a modified street stock. They let us do some things that outside the parameters of a normal street stock rule book. But we ended up, as things progressed, and what I would have had to do, I wrecked one car, what I would have had to do to get to the next level in the pro stocks would have really tied myself to Albany Saratoga. That's when I made the decision to go open. I went the next step, and I went sportsman racing the next year. At that time,
That's a big jump.
well, it was a big jump for me,
Yeah.
and it was an even bigger jump because Albany Saratoga didn't have a sportsman division then. So it meant you're running with the modifieds on Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
That's a learning curve that I wasn't.
Yeah, really.
I wasn't about to try and tackle. And so I made the decision that I was going to go to Fonda on Saturdays, and so not only was I learning a new car, a type car, I was also learning a new place, and I was learning a whole new group of people to race with.
Right.
So I guess what I'm getting at is that only lasted a year.
Yeah.
And I dug myself a financial hole trying to keep up, trying to get better. Lost a motor at the end of the year and just said, I got to make a decision here, and I just kind of backed away from it. That's when the door opened. I knew I wanted to stay involved in the sport. I knew I was not going to be happy sitting in the pits when the feature went out. So helping somebody else was kind of, could I be on somebody's race team? Sure. But I knew it wasn't going to satisfy what I wanted, what I needed. So I had a conversation with now my partner at Lebanon Valley of 35 years, John Stanley, who we knew each other a couple of years ahead of me in school. Another guy from Clifton Park went to Shen.
Mm-hmm.
It was at one of the mall shows in the winter, and John said, well, we had talked about the announcing part, and anybody who knew me and said, you're talking about what? Because I'm
You were a shy guy.
I'm a self-professed.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert. If you don't,
You don't seem to be.
Not at all. I was gonna say.
I know.
That's what he told me.
people
I got
will-
it. It's right here.
People will
It's
not.
on
believe
my
that,
blog. It's got to be true.
because now you can't shut me up. My answer.
Well, this is an addiction as well, though. You
It is.
being behind the mic.
It's a
Look at Phil. He's on.
it's a labor of love. Obviously, it's something that I love when I get going, and I've had people say, you just turn the mic on and your mouth just never stops.
Right.
And guilty as charged.
Yeah.
Yeah, but to be a good announcer, isn't a lot of it about the information, relaying the information to the fans? And thankfully at Albany, Saratoga, place is jammed every week. Relaying important information to the fans, letting them know who's in what car, because things change every year. As far as some teams change numbers, some change paint schemes, whatever it might be. And then
Sometimes in the same night.
yeah, right.
Forever evolving.
And then it's about having an interesting story or two about what you learned that week from competitors, or going into the past and saying, oh yeah, his dad or grandfather won a championship here, whatever it might be. Those are the very important things I've always looked for in announcers, and that's why you're one of the best I've ever heard. And I go back, the best ones I ever heard, in addition to you, were at Stafford. You had Jackie Arute, you had Mike Joy, Ben Dodge.
Rushed out.
Yeah, and so you had guys go from Stafford to MRN.
Okay.
And I think you'd be great.
I was gonna say I thought Mike Joy did. Yeah.
Motor Racing Network,
Yeah.
by the way, which is the radio arm of NASCAR. For those that aren't familiar. And so, I grew up as a kid listening to those guys, and they were fantastic. And that place was premier. I mean,
Still is.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, it was terrific. As far as the sound system and the pits and the area for the fans, and just top notch.
I also
I
think
think-
a good announcer can definitely make a race. I do believe
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. But I think that's why you're one of the best. Those are things that you focus on, and
Yeah.
so I'm sure during the week you're doing quite a bit of research and talking to competitors and car owners.
I try.
Yeah.
And honestly, in today's world, with social media, I don't have to try that hard
Yeah. Well,
because
true.
it's
It
out
comes
there.
to you.
It's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All you got to do is go get it.
Yeah.
It
Right.
used to be, and I'll be the first to say that, I've got a network. There's a lot of people that will let me know. They'll ring my bell. And they'll say, "Hey, did you know?"
Yeah.
So I've made enough relationships at the racetrack where they'll hunt me down before the show starts, and I don't get down into the pits. I shouldn't say every night. I don't get down to the pits anymore. I used to try, we used to do it every night in the early part of my career, but now just between full-time employment and not having a lot of time to get there before, and then I've got a few physical setbacks that I just can't do it. So,
Mhm, mhm.
but like I say, I've got a lot of people that they'll reach out to me. They'll get word to me. I've made a lot of. I've used to stand at the banquet and tell guys, I'm here for you. You get me the information. I'll get it out there. When you've got that sponsor that comes to the races once a year,
Yeah.
and you want to make sure he hears his name, find me.
Yes.
Get the word to me.
Yes.
And trust me, it doesn't cost you a dime. It doesn't cost me a dime. And we're going to send somebody out of here happy. And
Yeah.
you might get that dime in another way.
Yeah, that sponsors now feels acknowledged, and
Yeah.
for whatever reason. Yeah.
And going back to what makes a good announcer, I'm the furthest thing from a great announcer.
I disagree.
I try and do the best I can with what I've got,
Yeah.
and I look at it. I have never talked down. I have been witness to some of you get some of these guys that, and there's not a lot of them, but I've been witness to it where you make fun of the poor guy out there or the class. I look at our entry level divisions, and you compare them to the headline divisions, and you think about this time of year they're getting ready for opening night. A lot of those guys and gals out there busting knuckles trying to get ready for opening night don't have heat in the garage.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They're I know what it's like to be that.
Yeah, they're the ones hitting the salvage yards for an extra head or some rims or something. Yeah, absolutely.
Middle of the summer, getting stung by bees, and in this time of year, you're out there slipping on the ice and trying to bust parts out of frozen mud.
Yeah.
But that's just one way I have always treated it. Is you try and treat everything with respect. You don't talk down to the people, and I'll say one of the challenges that I found early on in my career was the fine line between educating the non-race fan and insulting the intelligence of the race fan that knows more than I do.
Right.
It's a fine line.
Sure.
It is.
Because you could, I've been the guy in the stands that go, what the heck is he talking about? Because he doesn't think that we know what the green flag and the yellow flag mean.
But there might be that one guy that's never been to a racetrack before. What the hell's that guy doing waving that flag?
Right.
Sure.
And it's a fine line. And
Yeah.
and then social media came along, and I got tore up for being the guy that wants to hear himself talk.
Everybody's the keyboard warrior. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've got a job to do. I try and do it for everybody. I don't mean to make it sound like a negative by any means, but it's just one of those things where somebody's going to find fault with something. We're human beings.
As far as social media, I find the best thing to do is just ignore it. You do what
Yeah.
you gotta do, and then let the haters hate, or let the critiques critique, and then you just go ahead and do your own thing.
I will agree with
Yep.
you in the sense, but I will also acknowledge the fact that criticism will make you better.
Oh yeah, no, I'm saying
Yeah.
that the ones who criticize
And-
you because you're telling somebody about the green
Right.
flag, that sort of thing.
But no, I see it both ways.
Yeah.
You do have to turn a blind eye sometimes and say, okay, just brush that one off.
I mean, have you heard the Phil Barrett show?
We gain new haters every week. Well, it's kind of the same thing we're doing here because, I don't want people out there that don't know anything about auto racing to not, to shut off and just say, well, I don't care about auto racing. Because you can learn from something all the time as long as it's delivered the right way. That's why I think, we stop and explain certain things. There's people out there that are going to be listening that have the experience you and I have, but there's many others out there that have no idea what a mini sprint is or a mini mod or how that works. So it is important to stop and explain that a little bit because we want everybody to enjoy what we're doing here, and many people out there have no idea who you are. But boy, there's a lot of folks out here that are going to be watching this saying, oh, that's my old buddy, and he's been around for a very long time. Tell us about, Mr. King, Mr. Stanley. They helped you get into the announcing game, right? Because first at Lebanon Valley and then Albany, Saratoga.
Yeah, John and I started, well, I talked about that 1989 season after 89 was the year I ran sportsman at Fonda, and that was kind of the end of my career. I came back another 10 years or so after that. I bought another car and did some real part-time stuff, but did end up going to Lebanon Valley in 1990. John had worked there, and John goes back prior to that. Now, again, John Stanley, and most of the people know that name. If you're not a race fan, you know him from, he worked 40 years behind the microphone at WGNA, Jumpin' John. And along those same years, and John was brought up around racing as well. He had been at Albany, Saratoga from its infancy. And he was a track announcer at Albany, Saratoga in the C.J. Richards days. And got away from it for a while, and then came back and was doing a little bit of part-time helping out when they needed somebody down at Lebanon Valley. And after 1989, Jimmy King was doing the modifieds. He was moving on. He went down to Orange County, and Mark Sherwin, who was doing the support divisions back then, they had one division of street stocks, but they had 100 of them. Or they were pure stocks. I don't even remember what they did call them at the very beginning. But Mark Sherwin was also calling it a career for family reasons. He lived up in the Adirondacks, and it was a challenge to come down here on a Saturday night.
Sure.
So we had two brand new announcers. We had one that was totally green behind the ears, and JS had actually worked filling in some for Jim King the year before at Lebanon Valley. So John kind of took me under his wing. One of the first things John said, and it used to be you had an announcer and you had an assistant announcer. First thing John said is, we don't have an announcer and an assistant announcer. We have co-announcers, and referred to me as his partner, and not my assistant. Couldn't hold a candle to what he did, but took me under his wing. Ever appreciable. I refer to him as not only my partner, my co-worker, but a great friend, and has been all these years. And we worked together at Lebanon on Saturday nights from 1990 to we'll be there in a couple of weeks again. We just did the banquets a couple of weeks ago. And
Were you at the car show at the mall the other day?
I was not.
No,
just because I don't get around real good, and I knew what that was going to turn into. And
It's pretty cool, actually. I have to say, there was a lot of nice cars there.
Yeah. It's it very, very well job there.
Yeah, they did a nice job.
And this is only the second year they've been doing it. They really put together a great program to bring that product to people walking in off the street. Now, any race fan was there to check it out. We're all jonesing. We're chomping at the bit. Yeah. But for the guy or gal or family that were just wandering into the mall that day with something to do, hey, look at pretty race cars, and they're handing out children's passes.
A lot of teams were raffling off bicycles, and just to get
great
things. It was great.
Lance and Jill Sharp put a lot of effort into that. They're the driving force behind that.
And that was the Lebanon Valley Speedway car show at the Colony Center Mall.
Yeah.
And it's the second year they've done it at that location. And basically what they do is competitors bring their cars into the mall for the day. So as you're walking down on the bottom floor of the mall, you walk by and you saw, God, there had to be a couple dozen Probably more than that.
And
I think,
every class that race from
Yeah, yeah.
go karts all the way up to the ground pounders.
Yeah,
And the drivers were on hand to talk to the people. You know, some like I said, some of them were fans, and they couldn't wait to see and talk to their favorite
Yeah.
drivers.
yeah,
Others that just walked up, and they had candy for the kids. They had like Jay said, they were giving away bicycles.
Yeah.
yeah. It was cool.
Hats, T-shirts. It was really
Very well
interactive.
done.
It was awesome. I loved it.
Yeah, that used to be. Well, they just had one out to Rotterdam Square Mall for Fonda Speedway
Right.
too, but that used to be a little more prevalent. We had them at Latham Circle Mall years ago.
Oh yeah.
There was one at Clifton Country Mall. Well,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say one. A couple of years they had them at Clifton Country Mall back
Yep.
in the day. So this is kind of like the rebirth. And like I said, Lance and Jill Sharp have really. They pounded the bricks to get people to come out. Now the people are calling them to try and get their cars in.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's-
They did a
Maybe
real
we
nice
could
job.
do something at Clifton Country Mall.
Yeah, I think we could put something like that together. It would all depend on the management in Albany, Saratoga wanting to do something like that. But yeah, I could definitely help in that regard.
did it at Wilton Mall for a number of years as well. They had a real nice show up there for years.
Yeah, remember
But
going up
the
there.
malls have kind of gone to almost non-existence.
But I'll tell you, having been at the mall for the weekend, because I was also a vendor at the Colony Center that weekend, it was every store that was in there loved it because that place was packed.
And that's been the story
Yeah.
for all of the mall
So
shows.
it's a good for both people. It's good for the mall and it's good for the racers.
And they equated
And the
some of
sport.
numbers
Yeah.
were, I mean, other than Black Friday and the Saturday, the weekend before Christmas, it was one of the most trafficked, weekends.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, a lot of malls are falling under tough times, no doubt about it, and some of the area malls. Clifton Park Center Mall, certainly an exception to that. It's been a long road, but it's basically full. There's a lot of investment going on in the mall with new renovations and moving around of different tenants within the mall. So that mall's 90+% full. The same gentleman in group that owns the Clifton Park Center Mall just purchased the Wilton. And they've been great corporate partners to work with. Faraz Khan and his team have done a great job. So people in Wilton should be very excited about the future of that mall. So yeah, maybe we can get another show going. But a year or so ago, I wrote on my blog a piece about why the racetrack is still relevant. Now, I was basically talking about any racetrack, and I've been to countless numbers of tracks throughout my life, big time NASCAR racing, but mostly weekly racing throughout my life, many tracks, dirt, pavement, everything. And I talked about why the racetrack is still relevant in today's world. And I went through some of the reasons that I thought it was relevant. It's not only just a great place for a family to go inexpensively for a great night out, but and that's as far as the attraction side of things for people, for spectators, but talk mainly about the competitors and what you learn being involved in the family aspect, learning how to fix things, commitment in an incredibly challenging activity, I'll call it, of auto racing, which the work that's involved, the money, the time, the effort is just incredible. What these folks invest in their cars to get the car to the racetrack. Never mind if something goes wrong while they're at the racetrack, that turns into more work and more money. Why do you think the Speedway, any Speedway, is still relevant in 2025 America?
Well, now there's such a wide spectrum of where the race fan comes from. And this comes from conversation to people when I mention the Speedway. When I'm out somewhere and mention the Speedway, they say, oh, yeah, we go up there. Sometimes we go up a couple times a year, but we go once or twice and we take the kids and we have a great time. And I start, and sometimes I'll question, how come you only go once or twice?
Yeah.
But then you've got the other end of the spectrum is, of course, I know where I'm going to be every Friday night from April through September.
Right.
But to a hardcore race fan, their season is planned as soon as the gates open in April.
Yeah.
And it's you're going to be there. You know you're going to be there, and you wouldn't be anyplace else if you couldn't be. But there's a wide gap there. It's like you just mentioned. It's one of the most inexpensive entertainment venues you'll find.
Yep.
From walking in the front gate, price of admission, to eating at the concession stand.
Yep.
The fact that it's an open air venue, it's a program that is it's broken up by the different classes for the folks that may not be familiar or aware. There are different divisions of racing, from the entry level right up to our most professional level, that what we call the headliners.
So your entry level be your four bangers,
Your four cylinder
pure
cars,
stock,
your
yeah.
street stocks,
And then the upper end be your obviously the ground pounders, the big block modifieds,
Right.
that sort of thing. Okay.
and that
And every class in between.
Right.
and
Yeah.
there is a feeder division type deal, like today's sportsman driver,
Move up to
open
the
wheel, less
yeah.
powered, but maybe in 5 years you're going to talk to him as one of the headline.
one of our good friends did that transition actually.
Yeah.
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 and that's a natural progression. That there are some people that come out and they want to jump right in. They don't want to stick their toe in the water. They want to jump in. And
Yeah.
some of those people make it. Unfortunately, some don't.
Right.
They go and they either find that it wasn't as easy as they thought it was going to be, and they'll lose interest, or they'll dig a financial hole or whatever that they can't get out of, and we see them for a couple of years and then we don't see them again.
Right.
There's others that they'll make the natural progression up but what I started to say about the open air part and the different, you get different things if you want to see. A lot of people show up to see, whether it's a friend, a family member, the next door neighbor, or whoever. They know there's a race car. Let's watch this one. Oh, his race isn't coming out until later. So they get up and they take a walk and they go down and get something to eat. Not like when you go to the movies or you're at a Broadway show, or a live show, or a sporting event, something like that. You really you get up, you're going to miss something that is all part of the show. So that makes it attractive to some family type deals,
Right.
where you can't expect, you got an 8-year-old kid. I was an 8-year-old kid. You couldn't get me off the bleacher board.
Yeah.
I mean, once I got there, I'm here to watch the race. They're playing football down behind the grandstands. Well, look, I can play football tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
I'm here to watch the races.
Right.
But that's not the case for every 8-year-old kid. He's got to get up. He's got to burn some energy off.
Oh,
and,
Sure.
Go down and grab a Mountain Dew, and he burns a little more energy off. But
Right.
but it's just a great atmosphere. You get to know the people around you. Dave Moody, you were talking about MRN announcers. Dave Moody has a line that he talks about what makes the racer special, and how during the week the guy that
I was gonna say that actually. I heard that.
The guy that
Tornado wrench somewhere.
might be the guy that picks up your garbage on
Yeah.
Thursdays.
And on
on
Saturday, he's your
Friday,
hero.
He's a hero.
Yeah.
And he's out there, and you're going to watch him, and you're going to cheer him on. And come Monday, when you see him again, you're going to tell him what he did right,
Yeah.
what he did wrong, and or you're going to congratulate him. And that line sticks to me, and
Yeah.
and I think about that when I can share, as you said, share some of the stories
Yeah.
and the knowledge.
It's funny you mentioned that particular, because I don't listen to MRN all that much. I think I caught it one time, and that was what he was talking about. And when you mentioned what makes the dirt tracks of and the weekend dirt tracks so popular, is because I think that's exactly what it is. You have the guy who's maybe a garbage man, or he's a wrench turner at a garage. He not to belittle it. He's a know nothing guy, just not known a nobody guy, you know. But on Saturday and Friday, he's somebody's king.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
you know, he that's what he lives for, and I think that's what makes. And he's your neighbor. He's the guy down the street. It's the guy you see at the coffee shop.
You drive by that
Yeah.
driveway every day, and you see that trailer sitting there, and you know there's a race car in that
Yeah.
garage, and you damn well know where it's going to be on Friday night, and you get to go watch it and cheer him on. And
Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, Freddie DeSaro was my favorite driver. As far as I knew, that was all he did. I forgot what his profession was. He did have a full-time job, but back when you were a kid, you just figure, well, that's what these guys do. I mean, they're racing on Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, special shows during the week, and so it must be, that's all they do is drive race cars. But these guys are doing all that, some of them that do race that often in the higher divisions, and they've got a business to run. They've got a full-time job. They have a family. It's and that's the commitment part that I talked about, and that's what I want to teach my kids. My two younger ones now. It's about, and I did with my older kids. It's about being committed to something that you love so much that you'll do whatever it takes to do it. And I think that sums up what we see in the pit area. Because most of these guys don't have $1 million checkbooks. Very few, right? But they do what it takes to get it done, to get at the track, to live their dreams. It's something that they'll, I'm sure you with your driving career, you'll never forget it. You look at it fondly, the good times, the bad times. You still look at it fondly and probably proud you always did it.
Yeah, and you know, you use the word commitment, but right alongside the commitment word is the investment.
Yes.
And
Yes.
investment can be branched out in many different ways. Investment of time,
Yes.
incredible.
The
Yeah.
time is, yeah, amazing. It's amazing.
The time that you devote, and there you go, with devotion and commitment, you know, being a similar term. The time that you devote, the investment of time, the investment of resources, the investment. I mean, my paycheck when I was racing, I knew how much of my paycheck could go for racing. You know, naturally, you cover your living expenses first, and you knew what you could do as far as when you could buy a new tire. Now, some of this was whether the success of the previous weeks, yes,
Yeah.
but you knew when you could afford to buy new tires. You knew when you wanted to up the game and go find another tool that would make your life easier or whatever. At the end of the year, you knew how much money you could put away for freshening the engine. I've got so much respect for anybody that goes out there and anybody that continues to do it. I know the devotion, I know the commitment, and I know the investment.
It's
And let me ask. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
go ahead. I'll
And
you.
let me ask you this. We're not going to get into what's happening with the track. I'll get into that later in the show. Update everybody as to where that stands, to the knowledge that I have about it. But if the track were to go away, what does this area lose? What does our society lose? What does our culture lose if we lose a mainstay like the Albany Saratoga Speedway? And I know there's a good portion of our population that could care less, but that's true of anything, right? There's all kinds of things in the capital region that people go to or partake in, and it's for basically a certain section of society that likes to do that or likes to do something else. In this case, it's a very wide section of our society that attends the track, competes, works there. What it's meant to the town of Malta and Saratoga County for all these years. What do we lose if we lose that track? Why does it matter?
Well,
Other than your position there as an announcer, or the fact that I like to go to the track every week. Taking that separately, what does our society and our culture lose?
It loses a big part of what our area has been.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, Malta today and Malta 10 years ago and Malta 10 years prior to that, three very different Maltas.
Yeah.
Global Foundries has changed that a lot,
Yeah, sure
Yeah.
has.
Yeah.
And
for better or for worse.
I
Understand.
have been a recipient on two different parts of that. I worked at Global Foundries, for Global Foundries. I've worked for contractors that service Global Foundries, and I work for a company today that a lot of our business is predicated around Global Foundries. That is Malta. That is Malta today, and in the years to come, if everything happens for what the plans are, it's going to be even more. And maybe that's part of why we're, bringing more concern to what it is. But Albany Saratoga Speedway and in the town of Malta, or and again, growing up a little bit further south, I always refer to as southern Saratoga County, but that being more in a central Saratoga County. The people I know, the people I've known for decades, and a lot of these people I've known for the majority of my life. I might not know their name. I might know them by, hey, bud, how you doing? How you been? But I see them every Friday night. I've seen them every Friday night for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And
It's part of your social net.
And when I walk in, and I don't even have to walk in. I can start driving in off of Route 9. I see the families coming with their blankets, with, the kids. And the kids are wide-eyed. And the kids, some of the kids, the younger kids are skipping. They can't wait to get in. And that's why one of the things I'm always careful around as we get in, because I know these kids are not paying attention. These
They're
kids
excited.
want to get into the races, and they can't wait. And they smell the popcorn. And they smell the burgers, and they just can't wait to be there. And it's that family entertainment, and it's such a different venue where they don't have to be the hardest core race fan, but yet I'll see somebody walk in. That likeness of my age, that I've known them since we were teenagers, going there, and they're there every Friday night. They may have a spouse, they may have a girlfriend, they may be all alone, they may be with one of their buddies, but it's the same way I've seen them for all of these years.
Yeah.
Or I'll see them with their family, be introduced. This is, I've been introduced by some of these people that I know, and some of them I had grown to be friends, and I say I didn't know names, whatever. Some of my best friends I would have never known without being at the track on Friday night. But they would, 10 years ago, they might have introduced to me their son as a 10-year-old boy. That I'm saying his name now.
Yeah.
That kid's in the pits.
Yeah.
Dad's down there helping, or he's sitting with mom in the stands, but that kid's racing.
Yeah.
He's had the bug. It's bit him. He wanted to go racing. He's racing now.
Right.
And it's a vicious cycle. It just continues on. I mean, I can't even imagine. And I know someday it'll be hindsight.
Yeah.
But and we've seen other tracks come and go. But to me, it's just it's a lifestyle on a Friday night.
Well, Saratoga County's got 250,000 people population. We have many businesses, many reasons to come to Saratoga County, big and small in stature, as far as recreational areas and things that attract people to Saratoga County. Albany Saratoga County Speedway is a huge piece of that. I think what we lose is part of our, as far as a cultural society outlook, is part of our entrepreneurial spirit. I think we lose an area and an opportunity where the next generation has a place to learn how to fix things, learns commitment, devotion to a dream, and really learns what it takes at a young age to actually get something done, this Herculean task of taking this car and getting it to where it needs to be to compete well, and then be able to come back the next week. That kind of commitment and investment on all levels is incredible. And as you know, I think we lose all that. I think we have many people in future generations that lose that opportunity to learn all of those lessons and a place to fix things. One of the things, and I say fix things because so many of these people in the pits, I mean, they are the wrench tuners down the street, turners down the street. They work in cars. Some don't. Some don't. Some are good at body work. Some are good at engines. Some are good at shocks, and some are take care of tires well, because there's a science to that. But you can learn everything across the board, and you take a problem and you have to fix it. You have to take every piece of knowledge you have and try something, because that track changes every night. It may look the same, but it changes every Friday night. It's a little different, and adjusting to that. And it's all about problem solving. Those are I think the overlooked things that our culture and our society would lose, in addition to all the obvious things. An incredible venue that attracts hundreds of thousands of people a year. How it's such an important part of our economy and all those things. When you boil it down to the essence of the individual en masse of what we would lose, I think that's what we would lose. And you mentioned one of the things that's really changed in auto racing over the years is the youth. I mean, you've got the Crane kid winning features in the sportsman division at 11 years old, 12 years old. And there's been others as well. And, that's incredible to see. And I give those kids a great deal of credit. But you didn't see 3-year-olds out on the track. Because down at Lebanon Valley, if you've been there, if you've been to the big track, well, there's a smaller track that is fashioned after the larger track for go-karts. And you go down there on a Saturday morning, and there's kids 3 to 4 right through adults. I mean, there's a ton of people there. They've done a nice job. And my son started last year and at 3 years old. And, I think it's going back to what you learn. I think it's important for him to learn everything I just mentioned, plus the confidence it gives you, plus the ability to understand and have respect for being able to control something that can be easily out of control. That you have the ability, you have the responsibility to be focused, keep your head in the game, and not only help get the cart to the track and learn what it takes, but also you're the one in control. And the confidence, the focus, those are all very important things, I think, for kids at a young age. But what have you seen through the sport as it's changed when we do have younger drivers and younger people getting involved? The good thing is about Albany, Saratoga, for instance, we see the NASCAR races on TV, right? We saw it Saturday. Sammy Smith came from 2-3 cars back to punt the guy on the last turn. You don't really see that at Albany, Saratoga, thankfully. You don't see young guys coming up and being overly aggressive. Well, I know some people would disagree with me, but when I say overly aggressive, I mean just flat out obvious things like what happened Saturday in the Xfinity race. But what have you seen, as we've seen changes now that we have some younger and younger drivers getting involved?
Well, to answer your question, to address there is, I think, one thing that the younger drivers have learned and are taught is a different meaning of the word respect.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to speak for anybody's operation or anybody's family, but when that younger driver who obviously isn't spending his money. He's spending, you know,
Mhm.
whether it's his father's money or whether, you know, where the money comes from. But most of those drivers realize that they are spending some, they are responsible for somebody's investment.
Yep.
And they handle themselves that way. Have we seen situations where that might be similar to what we saw last Saturday at Martinsville? Yeah, we've seen them, but usually that doesn't last
No.
because either dad will say, if that's what you're going to do, then
We're
you're
done.
not going to do it with my money, and we never see him again.
Right.
Or there'd be, you know, different repercussions. Another part of that is the respect for the fellow racers that you see every Friday night. A lot of these drivers are very good friends. You know, you hear those stories about the best of friends until the helmet goes on.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, once they go through that gate, we're not friends until I'll have a beer with you, or a lot of those guys are going to have a Coke with them. But
Neil Bonnet and Davey Allison.
yeah, there's many
Fisticuffs on the
But
racetrack.
that goes back to something you said when you went to Fonda. You said you were racing with a whole new set of guys.
Yep.
And that's the difference. When you're racing with the same people every week,
Yep.
what you do to somebody this week, you might get done back to you the following week. So that also, you know, in the back of your mind, you know, I'm going to see these guys again next week. So, you know, I'm going to, not only the fact that, you know, what I'm talking about, what happened Saturday on TV, those are multi-million-dollar budgets. You know, we're not talking about multi-million-dollar
they're
budgets
spending
here.
somebody else's money.
Exactly. In this case, they're spending their own money. And
But-
when you get in a wreck, it's
But
your money and
that
your
was-
time.
Always my issue with NASCAR, though, going back a couple of years, I think it's changed within the last couple of years, was here you got millions of dollars in the line, and somebody bumps you, and you're like, whatever. I'd rather the guy get out of the car and throw his helmet at somebody.
Well, sometimes
I mean, come on, you've just wrecked somebody's car who's got millions of dollars in the line, and you're like nonchalant about it. I want somebody passionate. Dale Earnhardt wouldn't have put up with that.
yeah.
You know, I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You got me thinking on some stuff, and you probably know. Chocolate Myers was talking one time in an interview, and he was saying of how financial commitments to racing. And he was talking how Dale Earnhardt had mortgaged his garage one time to get a set of tires for a race that Sunday. I mean, this is what these guys do every Saturday. Going to Malta, going to Lebanon Valley, going to Fonda. They've got everything on the line. So the commitment to these tracks by the drivers is substantial.
Oh, yeah.
And I think going back to what you said, I'm touching on a couple of things all at once. Going back to what you said as far as what does a municipality or a community or a region loses on something like losing a racetrack, you're losing a roadside oddity. And I think, I think that in the grand scheme of things that we always want to grow and make things better with McMansions and the Starbucks, we lose these roadside oddities that identify a region for a particular reason. You look at, all of us grew up around here and we all loved Hoffman's Playland. That's gone.
Yeah.
Now it's vacant. It's empty, actually. I don't think it's developed. And I think that every one of us loses something when that happens, and then the community loses an identifying marker.
Right.
Something that draw them here. Albany, Saratoga, for me, not that Phil will tell you I never go there, but it's always in the forefront of my mind because all my friends are now. I was showing you pictures of guys that I've supported. You know, on a Friday night, I used to live at exit 10, and you'd hear the rumble come 9 o'clock when the big blocks you'd hear it all the way from exit 10. You know, the rumble. You'd hit the Grand Prix Diner at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. That place is full of haulers, and all the racers are there eating their food. You know, these are all things that made our community the community it is. And I think that by not having a body that really looks out for places like that, I think we would lose a lot more than what we would gain by replacing it. And I think, you and I have talked about this, and I think that we had a whole podcast about it with a friend of ours, Jeremy Converse, and a couple other people, where I really think that there needs to be a little more central planning when it comes to local government and not letting places like that disappear, because we lose more than we would gain by putting a bunch of departments. Yeah, it's all about the money, and I get that, but I think you have to look at everything else that it brings in, like the teaching of the kids and the commitments and all these other aspects that aren't necessarily dollar related, but proportionally increase people's lives around And I think that's something more important that people should take into account before they just dismiss places like that.
Yeah, and that's the society and the cultural aspect of what I had mentioned. And, one time, it was probably a couple of years ago now, maybe less. I lose track of time sometimes as far as when we first found out that the track might get sold for this project that
Feels like it's been forever.
I know that was proposed for 750 apartments,
Mm.
and it was a Friday night. It was right after we learned about it, and that it went public. So I'm coming back. I don't even think I made it to the track because they canceled it. I was on my way. I stopped at Walgreens at exit 11. I'm going down the aisle, and who do I see but Dan Martin? And I said, sucks, Dan. Another rain out. And anyway, Dan told me we were standing there talking for 10 to 15 minutes, and we were talking about the news.
I actually think it was closer to 45.
Time goes fast when you and I talk.
And there wasn't even a microphone involved.
Yeah. And so we were talking about the prospect of the track going away. And, you told me an interesting story, how it wasn't the first time that the track was endangered, I guess. And that was when it was under the former ownership. And Dan told me a pretty cool story. Would you mind talking about that again?
Well, it wasn't cool at the time.
Yeah.
It worked out.
10 years later.
Worked
it was
out
cool.
to the better. It definitely worked out to the better. It was 2011. The Richards family had come off of a couple of seasons running under the NASCAR banner and the asphalt.
That's when they paved it,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, okay.
And
It's
that
terrible.
did not work out. No secret there.
Yeah.
There weren't many people in the stands. There
No.
weren't many cars. And let's face it, the land was worth more. He had offers back at that time. The land was worth more to him to sell it than it was to try and make what was a measly profit.
Mm.
And it was the Richards family. It wasn't a one-person show. They were trying to support, multiple families on the income of. They had the two speedways between Devil's Bowl and Albany, Saratoga, but
Right.
C.J. Richards had announced that the end of the season we're done.
Mm.
It's 2011. It's when it's over, it's over. And those last couple of shows, heard a little quiver in my voice. Probably the low part of, obviously the low part of my racing career, no matter what I was doing. But I thought it was done. And that last show in 2011, I was the last person to walk out the door and literally turn the lights out on what I thought was the end of Albany Saratoga Speedway.
Yeah.
That must have been terrible.
It was
Oh.
it was bad. Somebody out there is probably saying, well, it's a racetrack.
Yeah.
It's a life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got a
It's
commitment to
life-
that.
It's a
Yeah,
lifestyle.
yeah.
And at that time, I had been there for as far as what I'm doing now, it was less than 20 years of it, but it was still, from I was this high,
Yeah.
and that's where I would be on every Friday night, and I thinking of those kids that I pass every Friday night on my way up to the tower, and even though there weren't a heck of a lot of them going at that time under the asphalt, and we were just it was just such a blessing that CJ and Howard came to terms on the sale of it. Our commander purchased it. He knew he had Lyle DeVore in position to, Lyle, same thing as me. He grew up there. He lived right up the road, and he went away to school. He went away to other business ventures. Learned a lot at working for other race tracks and promoters. But that was what he has wanted to do all his life, is to run a racetrack. And here was an opportunity for him. He was already working for Howard as the general manager down at Lebanon Valley. So it was a natural fit.
Great promoter.
Here you go. And oh yeah,
Yeah. I mean, he's won national awards.
people-
He and Marcy are a great team.
people have no idea, the hours, and I can expand on that situation now with all that's involved, but we'll leave that to him and what's going on. But just like you said, he recognized as a promoter of the year. That's a national honor.
Yeah, incredible.
Just the work that they put in, Lyle, his wife Marcy, and their daughter Mia, they literally put in, they live and breathe and everything for the Speedway.
Yeah, they sure do.
We call, it's a term of endearment, but we refer to ourselves as a Friday night family.
Yeah.
And there's a handful of us. There's a couple of us. Richie Peterson, Flagger, been there longer than I have. I was racing. He was there before me. Right out of high school, he was riding on the fire truck, or the ambulance, or one of the, before he got into the flagging part of it many years later. But Richie has been around for a long time, and that was the joke when Howard took over the track, that me and Richie came with the Speedway and came with it. They brought the dirt back in, and we had been there about the same time. So. But yeah, that was a pretty rough night, and walking out not knowing. It was, as far as I was concerned, it was over.
Yeah.
Because we didn't really see. We knew there was possibility that something like that could happen, but there was also some talk of, at that time, I know ShopRite had been trying to find a place up in that area.
Mm-hmm.
They came in with, who knew, if they'd come in with a bigger checkbook than Howard was willing to spend.
And today they'd be closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely correct.
Yeah.
I shop
Today
at
they'd be
ShopRite.
closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shop at ShopRite downstate still.
But you're going to continue for as long as the track is open, and I'm very. I look at it with rose-colored glasses, maybe, but I have a positive outlook, and you'll be there for the duration, right?
As long as I can do it.
Good,
It's,
good.
Like I said, I've been going through a little physical challenge right now. It might take me 20 minutes to get up them stairs, but it's 20 minutes I'm going to have to.
We'll get you an elevator.
Well, I've always
put in an elevator. How's that?
I've always said if they can keep those stands full, and those concessions
pit's
humming,
full.
and the pit's full,
Yeah.
there's always a good argument to keep it open.
And we have not had a problem, knock on wood, we have not had a problem with that, because it's some of the best racing, and I know that comes from me, it sounds like a homer, but
It's true.
it's some of the best racing you'll see anywhere. You don't have to go far to find that same claim to anybody out in the public. Got a big year coming at us, our 60th anniversary.
Exciting.
Got a lot of big events coming through. Just so many things through the year. And I can't see how it'll be anything different this year, and let's just hope that it'll be more of the same.
Still going, yeah. Well, and I think there's so many reasons for the success. It's a great location, very easily accessible from wide-ranging directions. Track prep. I don't know that there's anybody better in the country as far as track prep. The promotion that occurs at the Speedway, like I said, Marcy and Lyle, just a great team, and everything they do there with their entire team, and the affordability, and the fact that there's many competitors. I think the if you have full, there's heat races. A heat race is the qualifying races, and those take place before the feature race. So based on your finish in the heat race that you're in, which is a smaller number of cars, usually 8, 10, 11 cars, that would dictate where you start in the feature race. Or in some weeks, you may not even make the feature race based on your finish in the heat. And when you have full heats, full fields in the features, and there's different cars coming in and out, we always, I remember growing up, you always love watching the same guys every week, but then there'd be a special show, and Richie Evans would come in to Seekonk, or Jerry Cook, or Jeff Bodine. That was a big deal. Those guys that don't usually race here. You see a lot of that too. And they're all coming because it's a great place to race, and it's a great place to be a competitor, and they know that the track is going to be prepared 100%.
Question: what do you see with not to bring up politics, but with the animosity between us and Canada right now? What a lot of do you have a lot of Canadian racers that come down? And
Well, we just we got word that we're going to have one of Canada's best is going to be a Friday night regular.
okay,
Young upcoming driver Felix Waugh, one of our local businesses, race related, Elmo Speed Shop, Parts and Supply. The Reckners, Elmo Reckner, longtime runner, and now his son Chris is there with the parts truck every Friday night and supports the track in big ways. They do a lot. Some of it we see it, some of it is behind the scenes. They put through an effort to where, and I won't get into the meat and potatoes part of it, why Felix wants to come down here, but this is a young up and coming kid that he's got it going on.
40% difference in money is probably a big one.
but he's a second generation driver. He's had some real strong runs. He'll be here on the 18th of April as our opener as part of the Super Dirt Series. He would have been here anyway. He's had top finishes with the series when they came in, but now he's going to be a Friday night regular as well.
Do you have other teams that come from Canada?
We
on
get
the
them
big shows
here and there, and every once in a while. Another thing that we've got going for us is we're one of the earliest opening tracks. So
Yeah, they're still closed up there.
right, yeah,
Sure.
up there they won't even try and open till middle of May. Some of them don't
Still
open until
have
Memorial
snow.
Day weekend.
Sure.
But even some of the tracks from Central New York, we'll get the who's who. You used to get it the first couple weeks of the year. Now they're going to be here on the 18th, our opener, just because it's a Super Dirt Series event. They've got to come. So and that's the way we end our season too. The Malta-Massive weekend.
It's massive.
It's
massive.
2 years
Wow,
ago,
Phil.
They were parked down Route 9.
Jesus,
and
Phil.
Record numbers and just crazy. I mean, and it's you see the smile on my face. I mean, that to me, when you look out and you're talking to a full house, which usually it is a full house.
It's fun.
You can get crowd reaction.
Sure.
And you get the people, those people are fired up and they're more eager to see it than I am.
Yeah.
And I don't know if more, but equally anyway. But
They drown you out no matter what.
Well, and it's a great crowd. I tell people all the time, I've been to pro football games, college football games, basketball games. I've been to every sport.
Obviously, you haven't mentioned hockey.
Games.
Oh, whoa.
Hockey games, Canadians. Hockey games. And I've been going to races since I was a little kid. I've never seen... people have this picture of these rowdy people in the stands. I've never seen one fight in the stands. Now, I've seen a few
in the pits.
Yeah,
Sure.
I've seen a few of those over the years. But there's not one problem, not one fight in the stands. You go to some of these other sports.
Not in a hockey game.
Oh, yeah. You go to some of these other sports. I mean, the stuff that goes on, it is unbelievable. I'll never forget. I don't know if I told this story. The New England Patriots were banned from Monday Night Football for a number of years because they were playing a Monday night. Can't remember what year it was. It was in the 70s. Joe Namath was quarterback for the Jets. And it was such a disaster. People getting the fights, the drunks.
Oh, I watched that game.
There were a few drunks that ran on the field during the game. I mean, it was a total mess. And I was at that game. And never, I don't think my dad ever went to another professional football game after that. But you see what goes on in some of these sports. I've never seen one problem in the stands. Everybody's happy. They're cheering for their person. And that goes for Pocono, New Hampshire, Daytona, all the tracks I've been to, Bowman Gray, all the tracks that I've been to over the years, there's others, Dover, local tracks, never seen an issue.
That
Not one.
wasn't always the case. You
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't
it's,
always.
It's changed, and I
Yeah.
think part of that has changed to where,
But you gotta remember, I've been going for 50 plus years. I'm
part-
getting old.
He's the old man here.
I've been getting old. So I mean, even back in the old days.
Yeah.
I was going to the races.
When it really,
I never
when it was
seen-
really real horsepower.
Yeah, never
Phil.
never seen an issue. Yeah, real horses,
I
right?
heard was in the lineup.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.
But
And Phil's out there cheering.
but part of that too is the clientele polices itself.
Yes, exactly.
There's a
Exactly.
lot of people that would not let things get
Just
out.
like the
Yeah,
pits.
nobody wants to have
Just
a
like the
fight.
pits,
Yeah.
for the most part. Now again, people are going to disagree. Polices itself, right?
to
For the most
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
Well, when you got a lot of money on the line, passions run heat.
Well, yeah. Oh,
It
yeah.
is
Now
what
and
it is.
again. Now and again.
It happens.
Like that devotion and investment we're talking about.
Yeah.
When you feel you've been wronged and somebody screwed all
Somebody's
that up,
gonna get a
all that
helmet to the
time I
face.
put in, all that money I spent, and you have to do something stupid like that. Well, of course, that's there's going to be emotions at times in the pit.
and it escalates.
But that's different than the
It
stand.
escalates when you've got the guy that thought he was going to get the win that is always that far out of
Right.
reach. And,
Yeah.
Right.
And like you said, you feel you've been wrong. It's a natural reaction.
It
I mean,
is.
People are
It
going to
is.
react differently, but at the same time, you can see where it comes from. And, yeah, it's. But again, there was, and the people who go today, I don't think John Q. Public would think that way, but there was the tag of it's just a bunch of grease monkeys.
Yeah. Right.
Going out there, it's a bunch of rednecks or
Right.
whatever. But they go today, and all of a sudden they realize it's family entertainment. It's something as simple as well lit.
Yeah.
Albany, Saratoga, majority of the grounds are now paved.
Yes.
That wasn't the case years ago. You had
Right.
to walk through mud puddles and
Yeah,
and that's little. You walk around the grounds and see how well manicured they
Oh, yeah.
are, or the flower beds around the concession area, the small things like the picnic tables out in the concession area. It used to be you stood there with your box of French fries, and if you wanted dirt in it, you went up and sat in the stands. If you wanted it without dirt, you had to stand back and
Dirt is free.
Yeah.
And that's why
Free condom.
the gracious Mrs. Thompson doesn't go to dirt track because she doesn't like the mud.
Well, there's nights you can walk out of there and basically not even know you're at a dirt track. There are some nights, depending on the wind and if it's dry. And
Some days it's terrible.
It gets a little bad. But there's many nights you walk out of there and it's like, good. A little bit. Don't even really notice it. But I've sang in front of thousands of people many times, and they invited me to sing the national anthem at Malta Massive Weekend.
God, I
and,
missed it.
Place was packed, and what a reaction! Just great to have the opportunity to do that. In front
Dan,
of
did you know that his
very
son-
patriotic crowd?
not before that night. I did not.
He does a mean Frank Sinatra.
He did
Yeah.
I will be the first to say.
And his favorite song is My Way. You should hear him.
He did a hell of a job that night, and like he said, the crowd reaction, and you take it from, I'm standing behind this, and we now have a dignitary singing the national anthem.
Who's that?
Well, I know.
Oh,
No, maybe
we're still talking about Phil. I'm sorry.
maybe not in the undisclosed location, but at the same time,
Pump, Phil.
it made it just that more special, and that weekend
Sure.
is I mean, whatever we can do to make to spit shine that a little more, and when I come in, I get a quick briefing, when I walk in of this is what's going on and blah 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 blah, and Phil Barrett's going to sing the national. Really? And I was like, not that I discounted the fact that he could sing it, but he did a great job. It came through being a dignitary. It came from a political side. He thanked our veterans at the same time. There's all little things like that. I just talked about the spruced up appearance. the fact that
He's reinvesting into the track to make it a better venue.
the
Sure.
experience,
Yeah.
the experience. Another part of it is that makes Albany Saratoga so successful. And now Phil was talking about Stafford Motor Speedway and how successful they are. What a, this is a Taj Mahal, and it's a meticulously run program.
Oh yeah.
Well, just like this, you go and our program, there's a no nonsense approach.
Yeah.
When we flick the switch on, it's go Gophers right to the checkered to get it in, get them in. Lyle's thought, get them in, get them out, no nonsense in between. There's nights we get running behind, we have to trim a little bit, we'll skip victory lanes, we'll do whatever we have to do to keep things rolling. People, it used to be the night that you
Downtime is tough in all those venues.
well,
Yeah.
and the other part is just the speed and approach.
Yes.
And the way racing was decades ago, and I don't want to insult anybody and the what their thought process was, but Saturday night was race night. You left late afternoon to go to the track. You spent Saturday night. You were there till all hours. God knows when you got back.
Right.
And
Society's moved on from
people
stuff
were
like that.
fine with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
A 6-hour show was really not, I mean, they weren't so long hour wise because they only had a couple divisions. Now we got 4 or 5 divisions, and it just, we ramp jam and get it in.
And I left that out, is why this track is so successful. Because let me tell you something. As somebody in the stands with kids, when one race is over, that next lineup is on the track, and it just
Keeps
flows.
the kids engaged.
There's no long intermissions. They used to
Yeah, we do not take a formal intermission.
No,
There used
no
to
intermission.
be previous management,
that used to drive me nuts.
and
When I had when my older kids were young, and I'm like, because you're wondering, all right, when am I gonna get home? They're only gonna last so long, that kind of thing, and then they have an intermission for a half hour. It's like,
or
God.
track prep. Lyle
Yeah,
prepares the
yeah.
track to where, and
Yeah.
I'd be telling you a mistruth if I didn't say we didn't have nights he had to come out and cut the corner down
Oh,
because
sure.
it was coming
Oh,
up
yeah.
rough.
Yeah,
We had a lot
Yeah.
of rain that week and it was soft or whatever. It's coming
Right.
up ruddy. He'll go out,
absolutely.
but he'll go out. He'll fix turn 1 and 2 before this race. We'll run that race and he'll be down and he'll fix 3 and 4.
Right.
It's not. We'll go out and we'll take care of the track.
And let me tell you something.
And
That
while we're doing this,
so
why don't you go buy a
appreciated.
hot dog and a soda?
yeah,
and
yeah.
It's not that way. We do not take a formal intermission.
No.
We get everything done,
Which
in
is
compacted,
very appreciated.
and
Absolutely.
and part of that comes from experience. The tracks that aren't really cognizant of that fact and don't want to pay attention to it, to see a family like Phil's talking about, how long is the kid going to last?
Yeah,
Walking out before the feature event takes
Right.
the racetrack.
yeah, because I want to see
That's
the feature.
sickening to
I
a-
want to
to
see
a
the
promoter.
feature. He wants to see the feature.
Yeah.
My young kid.
But he's
and-
exhausted.
And now you're doing a half-hour intermission. It's like, so the fact, I left that out. The fact that those races go out, boom, 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 is huge and appreciated by the spectators. And there was one night last year where and it was when it was daylight late. It was as you get into
June.
late May, June. The feature was starting and it was still light out. I mean, so if you can get home at a decent
really
hour,
slamming those.
I mean, that's
those numbers
incredible.
are-
Well, in recent years now, the new management team down in Lebanon Valley is trying to, do the same,
Oh, good,
same thing in mind. We've got the advantage at Lebanon Valley of being able to start an hour earlier too. Saturday, you don't have to worry about people getting out of work, and so we
Right,
start at
right.
6 opposed to 7 o'clock on a Friday night.
Right.
And with what they've done down in Lebanon, trying to compress the program and keep things moving along, we had a couple of nights the modified feature was going out in daylight, and
Yeah.
it's just so weird because you're so used to seeing.
Oh,
You've built this hype up to the start of the modified feature. You got the lights and
Right,
the
right.
reflections and everything else. And it's
Yeah.
like daylight. It's like we're missing something.
How
Yeah,
how
yeah.
much of that condensing of that schedule on a Friday night had to do with some of the time constraints that the town of Malta would give you
there's been an unofficial curfew.
Like 11 o'clock, right? Or something
Well,
like that, 12 o'clock.
I should say the official unofficial curfew.
Yeah.
Because they will get fined. There's an agreement that you will be done. There were. I don't claim to know it. I don't know if Phil knows more about it than I do, but the story used to be you had to have, and this, you had to have the last. You could not put a race on the track after 11 o'clock.
Yeah, that's what they say.
So,
Yeah.
I remember one year that the pro stock division I was racing in, was the second to last feature. It was about 10 minutes to 11. The modifieds were after us. So if we took more than 10 minutes, which pretty much can guarantee, they weren't going to be able to run the modifieds, or they were going to be fined for running past curfew. So we came out.
But that was the 80s.
87.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this was 87.
Yeah.
And
And that was going on back then.
oh yeah.
Well,
And the ruling was then, well, and they even had decibel ordinances and everything else they were looking at back then. And before that, way back, they didn't even run mufflers. And that's when you say, living at exit 10, you knew it. I used to hear them down in Clifton Park.
Yeah. Just that deep rumble.
Yeah.
Could hear it.
But we came out, the pro stock feature was the second to last feature event, came out through the green. We ran a lap. We ran another lap. Yellow. What the hell's a yellow for? We all get
That was
pointed,
it?
We all get pointed to the infield,
Ah.
not to the pits. Out rolls the modified feature at 5 minutes to 11. They run the modified feature. Because our race technically started at 10:50, we could go back out.
Playing the rules. I love it. I love that.
Well, the track is a pre-existing non-conforming use. So the track can run unimpeded for forever, as long as they don't shut down for a year. If you shut down for a year, and this is true of any
All sets, yeah.
true of any business, then you'd have to go back to the zoning board and deal with that. But as long as you run consecutive years, they can run forever if they want, because of its status as a pre-existing non-conforming use. People I run into once in a while, they say, hey, what's going on with the racetrack? And so really all I can report at this point is going back a few months now. We all know that there was a project in concept, and as far as I know, the track property is under contract. I assume it still is. I never seen the contract, so I can't say for sure. But that's what I hear. So that property is still under contract. Now the 750 apartments that were proposed, along with some other commercial development, there's never been an official submission to the town of that project, and it would have to be what's called a PDD or PUD, Planned Unit Development. Planned Unit Development is kind of a specialty type project that doesn't fit zoning. So a project of that size, whether it's Malta, Clifton Park, or anywhere else, would have to be submitted as a PUD or PDD. And a project that is submitted under that designation needs to be approved by the town board. That's a town board vote, not a planning board vote. It would still go to the planning board, but it requires town board approval. Now, as far as I know, there's not been an official submission to the town for that project. Probably, I'll guess, because it's expensive to do that. It does take some engineering. I understand Malta's got a pretty high fee to submit a PDD application. So it would, be a considerable investment just to submit the project. However, the town board did vote on the prospect of that project coming forward, and it was 2 for, 2 against, and 1 abstained. So at this point, that project is stalled and has not made any progress whatsoever from the standpoint of getting through the process. And like I said, as far as I know, nothing's been officially submitted. So that's where that stands at this point. Again, assuming the land is still under contract. Don't know that for sure either.
How much do they want for
But
that land,
we'll
Phil?
see. We'll see what happens. What's that?
How much do they want for that land? What are they selling that for?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh,
I have no idea what
Do
the
you do it, Dan?
contract would probably be in the contract if there is one. They would have to speak to monetary value. Obviously, 750 apartments and commercial around on that same property. That's worth a lot of money. So you'll get more for the property with a project like that than you would be for many other projects that you would do for the property. If you were going to build 100 apartments as opposed to 750, well, you're not going to get as much money for
Sure.
100. So, so I have no idea. I believe it was purchased back in 14 or 13, perhaps, for $1 million. According to the public records. So that gives you some idea of what the value was at that point. But what it would be now if somebody bought it as a racetrack, hard to say. Basically, it's in the hands of the owner, and he has options, and we'll see which option gets exercised as we go forward. But that's the update now, as far as the project that's been well publicized and out there for quite some time. And the town of Malta actually just the other night had a public hearing on a 6-month building moratorium in the town. So typically through that process, when a town board has a public hearing, not soon thereafter, they do vote on that subject matter. So I assume there'll be a vote on the moratorium soon. I think they had 4 speakers. There was 3 for and 1 against at the public hearing. So we'll see what the town board of the town of Malta does with the decision on a moratorium. Dan, God bless you. Thank you for being here. I know you got to run. But the voice of our racing lives,
It was
Dan
awesome.
Martin, is here. And it was so great to spend time with him. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here, talk about what you love and what you love to do, in a place that many of us enjoy on a regular basis, and that is the Albany Saratoga Speedway. So we'll be back next week, promise. We got to get back on schedule here, Jay, and
Yes.
that's my fault.
Well, my fault as well.
I'm not blaming you, but that's my fault. So we got to get back on track here on a regular basis. Sorry we've been off for a couple of weeks, but just couldn't fit it into the schedule, unfortunately. God bless you. Thank you, Dan Martin, and we'll be back next week.
Till next time.